Hello, authors and readers, and welcome to my weekly YouTube videos. This is Miranda Darrow, and this week we're going to do a novel deep dive where I invite a guest to chat with me about a recent novel that demonstrates a specific fiction writing skill or technique. We'll explore how the author did it so that you can accomplish the skill or technique with an aim for improving your own writing craft. Spoiler alert. All of my novel deep dive videos contain spoilers of the books being discussed. So if you have not yet read 24 Seconds from Now by Jason Reynolds and want to read it without having it spoiled, pause this video and then come back and watch it once you have. I used to get really annoyed with my book club friends when we had a whole month to read a novel and half of them didn't finish it and they didn't want us spoiling it. And I would get angry. I'm like, this is the point of book club, is to talk about this book. And now you don't want to. So, no, this is a spoiler zone. So, we are going to dive in deep. And if you have a book club and you would like to play along, invite two of your bookish friends who have definitely read the book and have definite opinions. We have a book club booster kit where you can download the list of questions that we are going to cover, and we will timestamp the video so you can follow along. So again, this month's book is 23 Seconds from Now by Jason Reynolds, and the specific writing craft technique that we're going to be exploring is writing a book with a reverse timeline. I'm obsessed with reverse timelines ever since the Seinfeld episode of The Wedding. And I made a timeline murder board when I watched the movie Memento. And I have some seriously detailed notes about Ursula's Various Lives and Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. This has been an obsession for a very long time, more than a decade. All right, so let's welcome today's guest, book coach, author, and publishing strategist, Gala Russ. Gala, please tell folks a little bit about yourself and what you're working on.
Hi, I'm Gala, and if you detect an accent, it is because I'm originally from Russia. So that's the accent you're hearing. And I have been a teacher for all of my life. I actually have a bachelor's degree in education. I think once a teacher, always a teacher. And although my career kind of went through from being a teacher and then being a project manager and then working for a corporate world in the last 6 years, I forayed back into languages, and I have written more than 15 books at this point and published nine under a pen name Willa Drew that I write with my co-author, and those are all romance books. And some of them are YA romance books. Actually, our first book is We Blend. It also has a yellow cover and also has no explicit anything. And the most recent release was Not a Fake Chance, which is a fully adult dual timeline, dual POV
Ooh,
book,
love it.
which was a fun thing to read. So when you invited me to do this, I'm like, yes, I also love structure. I've been like super interested in complicated timelines, and I am actually currently working on an urban fantasy. Kind of darker vibes. I keep where are my my comps? Like these are my three comps for my novel. Hellbent by Lee Bardugo,
Oh, yeah.
Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, and Book of Night by Holly Black. So not fun rom-com vibes anymore, a lot more kind of darker and twistier. And I don't know, I don't have any plans of incorporating any complicated timelines and structures yet. But like now that I've been digging into this book and others, maybe I should. Maybe.
Yeah, and at the end, we're going to talk about not just this structure, but some other ones writers might use too. So make sure to stay tuned through the whole thing. Thank you so
So
much.
many awesome structures. I
So
feel like
many.
there's just
I
like the
know we could just spend all of time sitting around talking about that. All right. So in the description for this video, I'm going to drop the link to Gala's website. It's galarussauthor.com. And also, people who are newsletter subscribers from me are going to get a special bonus from Gala. So more reason to join my newsletter. All right. So 24 Seconds from Now is a YA love story told in reverse. And we're just going to jump right in with our questions. First up, the reverse chronology as a structural choice. How does Jason Reynolds, the author, use reverse chronology and strategic withholding of information to control emotional revelation? And what does the reader learn later that reframes earlier moments?
I think this is a great question. I also wanted to mention that a lot of these questions made me think a little bit about my English lit classes where I actually had to think about it. When you send me the questions first, I'm like, oh, this is nice. I have to turn on my brain for this one. So to me personally, I think that even though we start with they are about to have sex, we're introduced to a bunch of different threads with the dog, with the location where they are, that to me, like, create so many questions, open so many loops, and make me wonder and make me think, oh, what is this about? Why is this important? How is this going to go? And even though it feels like it starts with an answer, it also really still also starts us with, oh, will they, won't they? Will this first time actually happen or won't they? And that we don't find out until the very end of the book, which is kind of the biggest loop of it all and what is holding us to like keep reading and keep finding out. And I like how, I don't know, was a little bit obsessed. If I'm going sideways, let me know. I was a little bit obsessed with the dog. I thought the dog was such
Denzel
a
Jeremy Washington, the dog.
Jeremy Washington. And like the first thing I was like, why the heck does she have a picture of a dog on the mirror? Like,
In the
what is that about?
bathroom, of
In the
course.
bathroom. Like what? And then the name, like, why is that? That's such a weird name. And then the dog is such a huge thread throughout, and it explains so much and it tugs on so many heartstrings throughout, and it kind of unites the characters and the families together. And I'm like, that is such an insanely awesome device to use because I feel like a lot of times animals end up being more like a humorous sidekicks, which he also is,
Oh,
but
yeah,
this dog is also so much more
absolutely.
than just that. That's where I'm going to stop. What about you? What did you think?
Well, first, I'm going to say I'm going to start with the dog too. And it's on the cover. Denzel
Yeah.
Jeremy Washington is this tiny little dog. And the first line, Neo is standing there trying to convince himself that he's not afraid of this dog. And we're like, how big is this? And then we find it's got an overbite that he could use to open bottles. And it's just like, and then the dog's not even there. We find out that it's a picture of the dog that's curling up in the frame of the mirror in the bathroom, and the dog's name is Denzel Jeremy Washington, which is hilarious. And Neon, our main character, is talking to this picture of the dog, trying to gather and summon up his courage to go back into his girlfriend Arya's bedroom and possibly, hopefully, maybe get intimate with Arya for the very first time. And he's been building it up, but he is all in his feelings. And so it comes full circle with this dog because it's the dog who introduced Neon and Arya to each other at the very beginning, which was like 2.5 years earlier. At first, I thought it was just 2 years because I thought it was 20 more months, but it was 24 months after the 3 months, after the 3 weeks, after the. So it was more like 2.5 years.
Mhm.
But the dog had been running across the cemetery and gotten away from Arya and chased down Neon, who was terrified. And I'm like, really? Of this dog? Okay. But other things we got to see in the beginning is Neon mentions the high school superlatives, that he and Arya might be most like to like each other the most, which I thought was super cute because they reused
hmm
most and like. And this is very grounding. It shows that Neon is a high school senior and that he's thinking about being a senior and he's thinking about superlatives and he's nearing graduation. His whole life is about to change.
Yeah.
And he and Arya are looking at doing this, once in a lifetime to do a first time moment. And he's psyching himself up and to go make out, which they've done lots of times, but hopefully more. But if she doesn't want more, he'll respect that because he loves Arya, and that's so clear that he
Yeah.
really loves her. And so his feelings, his nerves, he's all excited and jumpy but also a little nauseous. Usually as an editor, I wouldn't necessarily recommend starting a novel with the main character looking at himself in the mirror and
That's
talking
such
to
a
themselves. I
cliche.
know. I'm
But
just
this
like,
is a
who's gonna tell
great,
Jason Reynolds no? Nobody, and nobody should.
no, but this is a very different thing because when we do the cliche version of the mirror,
Yes,
it's I look
she's
at myself and
staring
I
at her
have green
long
eyes.
dark hair. Yes.
Right. He's looking in the mirror, but we do not know what he looks like.
No,
Nor
he's
do we
not describing
care.
himself. And
No.
so
I think that was so smart. It was so smart. It was like him
it was
like,
like twisting
oh,
that cliche. Yes.
exactly. And so many other cliches were twisted.
I
there
know,
in the
because
book.
I give a presentation on openings, and one of them to avoid is waking up in the morning and looking at yourself in a mirror. And I'm like, okay, so he didn't just wake up, he's been up a while, but here he is, the first 3 pages. He's not looking at himself, he's like in himself, and he's talking to Denzel Jeremy Washington. Yeah,
Mhm.
and so he's trying to make sure that he's ready. But then how did he get there? So then we step back 24 seconds earlier where he runs to the bathroom after kind of freaking out a little bit. And then in that scene, we find out that Arya's room is decorated like a hotel, like a generic guest room, and that her mom is planning to take over that space as soon as she heads to college. Okay. And that room doesn't have any of Arya's personality, and she's not the favorite child. But this is just a hint. This is just like, and you're like, we're gonna get to see more. So I want to see more. And he talks about kissing her forehead and that he kisses his Gammy's forehead and how Gammy's
Yes.
mind is fading. And so this is so much foreshadowing of the things that this family had gone through in the previous 20, however many, 2.5 years. And then we
Hmm.
go back 24 minutes before that, and he's showing up at Arya's house, and he knows the rest of her family's out of town, and he sees the whole note door knocker. So there's a door knocker that looks like a musical whole note, which could also look like an eye. And we're like, well, that's interesting. And he talks about the
Why
paint
is this
color.
important?
This
Right?
is important.
Yes.
And that the house's paint exterior has changed like 3 times in the like 2.5 years that even, and I'm like, well, that's weird because it's a colossal job to paint a house. And who is painting this all? And so you're like, well, that's a hint. And that's a hint that the whole family caters to Arya's younger sister, the golden child, who has Sinisha and can hear colors, and she's a prodigy, and she's the most important one. And then there's Arya. And
Hmm.
so and so there's
Afterthought.
so many hints in the early pages. The first that are the chronologically last that talk about all the things that we're going to see. And so when we get the emotional outcomes first, then we get to see the context later. Yeah, so that's pretty much
Yeah.
what I
Wow.
have. Did you have anything else to add for this?
I think another, and it's kind of maybe not for the question, but another thought that I really had when I was reading the first couple of chapters is that whenever I talk to writers about making sure that your first and your last chapters are the bookends,
Hmm.
didn't he? Like he did an amazing job with
Yes.
that. He did an amazing job with that. And I think I sent you an email, but I don't know if you've seen it or not.
The verb tense. Yes.
The tense, the first chapter and the last chapter, the first chapter number one and chapter number eight are written in the present tense. The entire novel is in the first person, which is very typical for YA novels. But then chapter two through chapter seven are all in the past tense because now he kind of like we start in the now, then he goes back, and he brings us back in chapter eight to now. And I thought that was also so smart. There's just like so many smart writing skills used and devices used that I think we can go chapter by chapter and say, like, teach a, 10-week course on what to do. Like, what are the things to do, what works, and what you can borrow for your own writing. So that's
Yes.
just my
Well, and first of
little.
all, Jason Reynolds is brilliant. I've read several of his. One of them is a I think maybe novella length. The Long Way Down takes place entirely in an elevator ride down to the street from an apartment where a young man has to make a very critical decision that could change his life. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. But it's just
Mhm.
like, wow, I can't believe all of that had happened. And it was pretty short, but it was set in an even shorter period of time. But the kid was making such a mental journey and stuff. And so Jason Reynolds is a master. We could spend
Mhm.
all day talking. But yes, in this book too, I was just like, ooh, I want to find somebody to talk. I don't have enough bookish friends in real life. I need to find them and talk about them online. Yes. All right. We're gonna here you are. Yes, thank you, Gala. So, all right, question number two. Cause and effect. Because we see the outcomes before the causes, how does Reynolds maintain tension? And what keeps readers turning the pages when what happens is already at least partially known?
I think that to me, a lot of it was bringing the flash forward structures. I'm rewatching Breaking Bad right now with my husband, and Breaking Bad uses flash forwards a lot. Like
Yes.
the screenwriters love the flash forward. So to me, this is like a multi flash forward situation where we know something and we're intrigued by it. We're intrigued by the result. Like in Breaking Bad, they have this burned toys floating in the pool and then they're fishing them out. And then we're like, how did we get there? What happened? Like, this is not normal. And here, although I think in the first chapter, being super worried about your first time is normal. And I think he does a great job normalizing that feeling and almost doing the opposite of what I think people expect from romance novels. And that's why I think he calls this a love story, although technically it qualifies to be a romance because it does have a happily or happily for now at least. So it could be called a romance, but it is really not because it really digs into a very different aspect instead of like the fantasy life of a romance into a more what does it real life teen first time look like and how it is all the nerves and all of that scaredness. So by introducing that and by giving us all of those emotions, I think it hooks even more because now we want to know in every time with every chapter he gives us a little bit more but he doesn't actually answer all of the questions, which is what a normal traditional storyline does too, or at least is supposed to do, right? You're supposed to like we don't know something but
Question,
we give a
answer.
little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we kind of like answer we don't start giving full answers until the second half of the book. So technically he follows the traditional Western story structure that way by kind of teasing us and revealing a little bit for about the first half of the book and then giving us more complete answers throughout the second half of the book. But yeah, to me, it was really giving me the flash forward vibes, which I love. I think that those are great when done right, and he did a great job giving just enough more to want us to know even more about the dog, about the different parents and how the families are different. What does Arya want and what does Neon want, and grandmother stories and the whole group of kids, and definitely the yearbook was a great thread when we found out more and more and more about them. So I don't know. Is this too vague?
No, I think it's good. I liked your reference to Breaking Bad because I also recently watched that. And I remember the one about the burning toys and stuff because that was a whole season of foreshadowing. They
Yes.
showed those almost in every episode of the season, but you don't know until the very because he's cooking meth. I think
Yeah.
of course he blew up his own house because it's his backyard. We clearly see that it's his backyard and his
Yeah.
driveway and stuff. But spoiler alert for that, it was a plane crash, but that was related to the things that were going on, but not directly Walt causing this. But then Breaking Bad also used a ton of single episode flash forwards.
In the
And
first season, I
yeah.
think that was like a very go-to. And then in the second season, they did this one. And what
Mhm.
I liked about it, which made me think about it in the second season, is that when they were doing this flash forwards to the pool, they were not showing exactly the same footage. They were showing a little bit more.
Mhm.
They were like adding the glasses, then adding the two bodies, then adding like every time they were like adding a little bit more to make you think because for a while I thought, oh, he was tinkering with that hot water heater. I'm like, oh, did he like blow up his own hot
Yes.
water heater? Because like there were so many red herrings. So I feel like Jason Reynolds did the same thing where some of the developments were almost like red herrings, where you were like, oh, is this well like I think at some point I was thinking that um something bad is going to happen between Arya and Neon because I was trying to figure out what is going to be the dark moment. But it's the grandfather and the
Yeah.
grandfather's funeral that is that is the dark moment, but it's also the best moment because that's when they met.
It's when they met, right? Yeah, I know. And so there really
Sorry.
isn't a yeah, there isn't really a breakup in this.
No, there
No,
is
I
no.
know. So it's yeah. I love reverse chronology and time gap stories. And I see it a lot of them more as a why done it rather than a who done it. And so we know what's
Mm,
going to happen, but we don't know why. So this is kind of like Poker Face, where the Natasha Lyonne show, where we knows who did something, but we don't know why. And then we follow her as she tries to figure it out and gets there. And we're looking for the backstory, and we're looking for the motivation, and we're looking for the reasons why things that stick out are important.
Mm.
Because a lot of the things that are mentioned are important, but you don't know it when you're reading them the first time. And so, the example in the early chapters, we find out that Arya's family's house has been painted 3 times in 2 years. And but why on earth would they keep repainting the house? And it's the answer is it's for Turtle, the younger sister who is a musical prodigy, and so her musically obsessed parents, her mom who is a world famous trumpet player, and her father the maestro, center their entire life around the younger sister, and including when she says, I think the house feels pink, they just paint it pink. And then, no, I think maybe, lime green. Oh, that's perfect. And I'm just like, well, good thing you didn't have an HOA because they they would have put the kibosh on that. So to me, one of the challenges of writing a story with a reverse timeline is being able to set up compelling story questions. So the story questions are the writers crafting their pages so that they're thinking about the right questions to keep them engaged. Because if they're thinking about who is this or something else, and that's not important, then once they find that out, then we want them engaged in the stories that drive the plot. And it's tricky because we're in Neon's first person POV. We're in his head, and he already knows all this stuff. He's already lived it. So it's a tricky balance to set up enticing clues for readers to want to uncover without spoiling it all, without him risking becoming an unreliable narrator, which would be if he was withholding necessary information from the readers. And so he's not an unreliable narrator. He's not Girl on the Train or Gone Girl, lots of twisty thrillers. They're interesting, but you can't trust them. But you can trust Neon. He's the squishiest of marshmallows, the sweetest of
Yeah.
cinnamon rolls. He's not lying to readers. He's not lying to himself. He's just focused on the now and what's necessary for him. It's not necessary for him to think about the backstory of, oh yeah, this house used to be pink and yellow and green. He's just he comments on it in his head, but then later we find out why that was important and what it meant for Arya in her pecking role in the family, and it's all the lead up for the why they feel the way they do. And the readers want to know why, so they keep turning pages and finding out all these things, like Neon likes to eat French fries while he's watching a movie. And I'm like, well, that's really odd. I don't even know movie theaters that serve French fries, but Neon does. And then we find out that his grandfather, Grandy Earl Wednesday, had in his funeral in the last chapter, or the second to the last chapter, he had shared his love of French fries and movies. And that's that whole scene where he's talking about the minister is talking about Earl Washington's noble calling to make door knockers, and they have the whole call and response with the congregation. That was so real, so visceral. I was just like, you're there with him, you're feeling those emotions. And that's when Neon was at the youngest point in all of the book. And so we're revealing emotional causes. It's like, why does he feel this way later? It's because of all these things he's been through. So I guess that the takeaway is, if you're gonna play with structure as a writer, every scene still has a job, and a step backward needs to deepen our understanding of the previous.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talk to some of us, and it's usually like more advanced writers, not the very beginning. I introduce this concept to beginner writers, but I think it's harder for them to keep hold of that. But I introduce the concept of, you have your main plot, and then you have subplots, and then you also have threads. You have this items or things or behaviors or phrases that are going to be going throughout the whole story, and they're going to have a certain meaning behind them. And I think like French fries weirdly is one of them, right?
Yes.
And chicken tenders and French fries,
Chicken
and
tenders. That's
right,
Ari's love language.
that's her love language. And then like at the end, and you said they have like the superlatives at the beginning, right? They're saying, oh, we're gonna pick the superlatives, and at the end they're saying like most likely to be a French fry in the next life, most likely to be a chicken tender in the next life,
Yes.
and why she likes chicken tenders. And the chicken tenders come up throughout the story multiple times, and then the French fries come up in the story multiple times, and they start from the beginning again when he brings her the food and she's like, "Do you want a bite of my chicken tender?" She's like, "No, but I know that you love French fries." And he says yes. And then we find out at the end that is all because of his grandfather. But then the chicken tenders and French fries appear. I haven't noted it, but I'm gonna say in every chapter, in one way or the other.
Yes, and they're making them at the bingo hall in the
Yeah,
same oil that's nasty and old, but they still taste good. And we're like,
yeah,
well, I guess if you cook it hot enough, I guess you'll.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
they're everywhere. That was, yeah, no, that's definitely a thread.
Brilliant.
It's a callback, and it's just like there it is
Yeah.
again. And it
Mm-hmm.
shows that they're in their comfort zone and they're getting their needs met, which not everybody in their family always did. So I
Yeah,
think Neon had a better relationship with most of the people in his family than Arya did.
for sure. Even the difficult ones, even though I feel like with his sister and with his dad, his relationship was sometimes a little not as close not. I think it's still very close because he went for the bride advice to his sister.
Mhm.
He talked to like I feel like he has a good relationship with his dad, but a little bit, maybe a little bit further removed. While with his mom and his grandma, it felt like they were very, very close, but still definitely very good relationship overall. And they seem to come from lower middle class family, while Arya's parents, because of the neighborhood and everything, seem to come from this higher end, but the relationship seems to be a lot colder, and his relationship with his family seems a lot warmer
Yeah,
overall
it does.
to me, right? And then another thought I saw, I feel like some of the threads that he was putting in, some of the threads were just like threads, but that just like they were like revealing with every chapter more and more meaning behind. But I also like by the time I got to reread it, which I think that this is definitely a book worth rereading because, as you said, some stuff that is at the beginning that you don't know the significance of, by the end you're like, oh, that's why he put it all in the first chapter. And when you
Yeah,
go back and reread it, it just like reads slightly differently because you can pay attention to those elements more. So it's like a second reading is just as delicious as the first one, but just like
absolutely.
from a different angle. But I also liked how he presented Arya because when I first met Arya at the beginning, I thought that because of the way her family treats her, it felt like she's almost not a very like she doesn't have depth is probably not the right word, but like almost like she's not smart. But then when after they meet and we find out that they have been to the same school, but they haven't seen each other because she's in the smarter kid
Yearbook. Yeah,
classes.
yeah.
And then at the very end, they also talk, I don't remember it now exactly, but they talk like, oh, she's like one of the smartest kids in the entire school and she's super genius. But nowhere does her family talk about
No, no.
they
Oh, you're
completely
not musical?
ignore that.
Whatever. Yes.
Yeah, they completely ignore that. And I'm like, I understand why she wants to leave and explore. And I don't know what Neon is doing after school. Did you
No, I
understand? I
don't either.
don't
No.
know what he's doing after school. I was reading, and the second time I was reading, like, did I miss it? And I'm like, we don't find out. I know that she is going to leave for college somewhere because it was clear that was her goal. And I know that at the end he was like, am I going to be like that Friday weekend boyfriend? Is she just going to see me when she's back in town? So it sounded like he was planning on being in town and he was
Yeah, I
interested
think
in
his
filming and
plan might be to
bingo.
work at the bingo hall. And
Bingo
it's just,
hall, right?
yeah, I know.
It was so interesting that we never find out about that.
I know. I know. And it's just
Anyways,
like he's a senior in high school and he's not thinking beyond that summer.
yeah, and being with Arya and like,
Being with
yes,
Arya, who's
he's
gonna
a,
leave. Right. I
yeah,
know.
I don't
All
know.
right, let's keep her moving. So number three, tracking the growth backwards. Although the story moves backward, Neon's arc still feels cohesive and forward moving. How does Reynolds convey growth across time, and what can writers learn about how he maintains an emotional through line in a non-linear structure?
I think we touched on that. I think
Yeah,
that like the threads is part of it because he gives us the same items or things, and then we find out more about why they matter and how they came to be in their lives to begin with, starting with the dog. and the fries and the grandfather and the grandmother and the
And the
door
door knock.
knocker,
Yeah.
right? There are just so many of those threads, and the yearbook video and the superlatives and the chicken fries and chicken and like all of those things that are introduced in the first chapter are that to me, are how he keeps the emotional through line. Those threads are the through line,
Mhm.
even though the timeline is going not forwards, like in an opposite way.
So for me, I wrote down for this one that the way that you could kind of track it through the backwards was through the discussion of sex and intimacy. Because if you look at the earliest chronological, which were the last scenes in chapter 7, sex and intimacy is completely theoretical topic because they're showing flashbacks to his times with his grandfather Grandy. That was before the story timeline, before he'd met Arya, and they had debated the merits of sowing wild oats like his father had suggested versus exercising self-control like Grandy advocated. And Grandy's analogy was, I always want to eat cake, even if it's your birthday, my birthday, anybody, any old day, but it's not good for you. You got to pay attention to your sugar. You can't always follow your urges. So Grandy had advised that the urges don't go away, and sowing wild oats and getting it out of your system doesn't work. How many romance readers have seen that trope in action? Let's just
Yeah,
get this out of our
yeah,
system.
yes.
That doesn't work. No, that works good for getting people like emotionally involved with each other. So Grandy's advice was, it's up to you, Neon, as a person to set your boundaries and how you want to treat your body and how you want to interact with other people. So that's his emotional starting place.
Yeah,
And then we think about the moment in the mirror where he's like, do I want to do this with myself, with Arya? Do I want us to have that experience? And he does, but he's terrified because he has taken it from a theoretical to real within that course, and that was kind of a big part of his growth arc. His ending place is that they are making informed, reasonable decisions about what introducing intimacy would mean for their relationship and going forward together. And honestly, I couldn't think of a better or sweeter first time than these two because of everything that we saw them go through. And so when we get to chapter 8, where we're back in the now, and they're finally coming together, and we know from having read all that other, just how much they are in love and that they would do everything and cherish each other. So it's very
yeah.
sweet.
And I think I had a couple of thoughts because I was thinking about that conversation with grandfather as well. And you have another question about I think it's the next one, consistency versus maturity, because I feel like that was also answering to me that question. Because
Yeah.
when he's talking to grandfather and grandfather is using like euphemisms, and Neon is like, I have no freaking clue. Why do old people have to use confusing language? And why wouldn't they say what they mean? But it's partially because he's just not aware of what it all means, and sex is just not something that is as important or in his mind because although at some point he was also talking about the difference between me now at 17 and me at 13 is that at 13 is when the horny starts. And then he talks about the crusty socks that are lying in some of his
Yes. Yes.
drawers,
Yes.
you know. So that
As a
through line,
parent who
go
has
ahead.
raised teenagers, that's real.
Everything is so real in that book. Everything is so real. And I think that uh, even if we're not talking about first times and sex, I think because this feeling of when you're trying to do something new for the first time, when something new that you're doing becomes real and you have to take that step from theoretical, like I'm thinking about I work with creative entrepreneurs who, like usually writers or people in creative professions who want to start a business. Like you are an editor, I'm a book coach, right? So we are like at some point had to make that decision. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to do it for the first time. And it's so scary. And I feel like that fear of doing something that was theoretical and taking the first step and taking the action is so relatable on so many different levels because it's not just the first time having sex that you are feeling that way. It's the first time of so many different other
So many things.
things.
Yeah.
So many things. So I think that is also why that resonates so much in those feelings and emotions. And the other thought that I had about this intimacy arc was that When we first meet them in the first chapter, I feel his anxiety and I feel I care for him and I'm like, well, are you sure? I like maybe it's too early. Maybe you shouldn't rush into this because we don't know the whole backstory. So my sensation was like to kind of like be the mother and say, well, think about it. Is this really the right time for you? But then when we get back into that final chapter 8, I'm like, you're ready. You're ready, dude. You can do this. You're so ready because we know how much they love each other. We know how much thought they have put into it. We know that they've had the conversations with friends, with family, with each other, with themselves. And that feeling of should they or shouldn't they that I had in the first chapter transforms into, oh, yeah, they absolutely should. They're ready. It's going to be great. You guys are, this is the right time for you. And I thought that was also how in romance novels, when they're done well, when it comes to the intimacy, like especially if you have like first time intimacy happening early on and it's like on the spur of the moment versus later on, the difference hopefully the reader can see that later on it becomes a lot more of an emotionally involved intimacy versus just a physical intimacy, which again,
Absolutely. Yeah, no,
so
this is
different.
this is the opposite of a casual thing. This is the least casual. These people have, yes. Okay, let's shift. Let's move to question 4. Voice, because we were already talking about it.
Yeah.
Voice, consistency versus maturity. Neon's 17, but we're going all the way back to when he was 15. We're seeing him at different points. How do they balance having a consistent narrative voice with what you would normally see in a chronological YA with subtle shifts in maturity and perspective? So because of the structure, some of his development is implied rather than shown. So how does Reynolds signal that growth without a traditional step by step? It's just like, well, now I know. Yeah.
hmm hmm And I think we mentioned that, like, to me, some of it is the conversations about uh, what is sex, the conversations about the bra. Also, the bra is
Yes.
another
Oh my
thread.
God.
I love that so
I
much,
love that too. So
right?
mortifying. Yes.
Yeah, but it's so relatable. And so I feel like that was one of them for sure. I think that there is a little bit of the language because he does a very good job using colloquialisms in dialogue. Such a hard skill to master. I see a lot of writers butchering that. I feel like that's a higher level skill if people are trying to use accents or colloquial jargons in their writing. It's so easy to get that so wrong, because it becomes this caricature in
Right.
kind of like caricaturizes the characters instead of giving them depth. And I think that Reynolds did the opposite here. He uses a lot of colloquialisms and a lot of this kind of off the cuff real language.
Yeah.
And if you look at like the sentence structure and how they communicate with
I've got notes on sentence structure too. Yeah.
yeah, with each other and like with their friend group even, it definitely, if you like on the second read,
Yes.
what you notice, it actually does change and mature. And the vocabulary, like at the very beginning, weirdly, like there were certain words that are more complicated words, and then as you go back at
He
the
was studying for
vocabulary,
the SAT maybe. So
yeah, and then the vocabulary kind of goes and is much simpler as a result. So that's where my brain went. Where did your brain go?
yeah, no, I think voice is the thing. And so if your structure is doing something fancy, your voice needs to be very solid. Otherwise, you could lose your readers. And so readers need something to stable to hold on to. And so that's Neon's voice. It's consistent, it's specific, it's very internal. And so the voice feels like the same person, but as we're reading it, especially as we're rereading it, as we're preparing to talk, we can detect the subtle shifts in maturity and perspective. So the baseline voice has the same rhythm and the same internal logic and a lot of the same personality, but we see shifts in interpretation and in emotional awareness and his confidence in his conclusions. So earlier Neon doesn't sound like a different character. He reads situations differently because he doesn't have all the perspective that older Neon has. And so the growth shows up in how he understands events. Yeah, and so you don't need to rewrite the voice, but adjust what the character notices and what they conclude.
Yeah, I think also with the dog, I thought going back to the dog, my favorite character.
Yes,
I feel like his feelings towards the dog when he just met the dog, when the dog became part of his family, and now when we and like basically, I think it's chapter 3 when he goes with grandmother and goes for a walk with her, and even though he does not like the dog, he knows the importance of that dog to his grandmother, and his relationship with that dog is very different towards that dog because he knows how much, how important, and how help the dog is giving his grandmother. Well, at the very beginning, yes, he was afraid of the dog, but he also was a little bit like the dog was the antagonist. And
yes,
then in the early chapters, which is like the closer to the modern nowadays, the dog is a good guy because it's so important for the grandmother, right? And I think
right.
that shift in perspective also shows Neon's growth and understanding of what is important. And that his fear of the dog is not as important, and that he can overcome it because what is important is to help his grandmother and his girlfriend, and just the importance of the dog to them is more important than his fear. And I think that's growth too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I would say at the beginning that in the earliest points, Neon is not a dog person, but he sees his grandmother who has lost her husband and is starting to slip mentally, but this dog grounds her and gives her purpose. And so for that, he appreciates Denzel Jeremy Washington. All right,
And it was so cool to find out why that was the name of the
name,
dog at the
yes.
end too.
That the grandpa, that Grandy's favorite actor was Denzel Washington and felt that Denzel Washington should star in more romances rather than these action movies because the grandfather wanted to have more role models for his grandkids to see people like them falling in love and being romantic leads, like the actor Denzel Washington himself, if has had a very long and healthy marriage. And I just thought that was the sweetest thing. And then for the grandpa to love that actor, and then for the grandma to rename that dog after that. So it
But they
was
can't
all so
keep
sweet.
Jeremy because that was the original name
That
of
was
the
the
dog
dog's
that
original
Ari
name. That is
had.
not Denzel Washington's real
Yes.
middle name. I looked that
Yeah.
up. I'm like, is that
Yeah.
really? No,
Yeah.
it wasn't.
No.
but they needed the dog to recognize some part of his name because this is not a puppy. This is an adult dog that they were rehoming. Okay, let's go along to the next question. Scenes anchoring in time. How does Reynolds orient the reader in each new step backwards without relying on heavy exposition? And what techniques helps each scene feel connected emotionally, even though we're going back chronologically?
Well, he does very clearly mark the chapters. And when
Yes,
I
he does. He does. Yeah.
picked up the book first and it's called 24 seconds from now, and I you told me that it's going to be reverse chronology. I thought, are we going to go back in 24 seconds back?
Hopefully
But
not.
no. Yeah, I was like, that's going to be what is. So it is the first chapter is now, and then it's 24 seconds, then it's the chapter 3 24 minutes, chapter 4 24 hours, chapter 5 24 days, chapter 6 24 weeks, chapter 7 24 months, and then chapter 8 is now. But as you said, it is that many from each previous time. So
Mm.
that kind of like adds on a little bit. It's not those from the very first moment. It's
Yeah,
like
I had to figure that out after I was
as
like prepping
yeah,
for this.
as a sum up. So I think that labeling everything makes sense, but I also think that it shows things that we know will happen. How do we get there? Kind of like, yeah, like a prequel. I don't know how to explain that better. Um, and certain things that exist did not exist. He puts certain slight hints throughout. I feel like I was never confused as to where we're at. Um, when all the different things are happening between who is alive and who isn't, um, where the dog is located, where they are in their relationship with each other, where they are with the yearbook stuff or in the earlier on chapters. I think that let's see if you have a better answer for that one. I did not really. spot any one particular thing. I feel like it was just enough in the setting and where each character is, each secondary character was in what they were doing, that it made it clear to me when are we, in addition to just clearly labeling each chapter.
So the
What did you
first time
notice?
I read it, I listened to the audiobook because
Mm-hmm.
I'm an audiobook person and the audiobook is really well done. And I
Same.
wasn't confused, but they do have clear markers for each chapter. 24 seconds earlier, 24 minutes, 24,
Mm-hmm.
hours, all those things. But there is not just one scene in each of those. Sometimes we have multiple scenes, and then
Okay.
those are moving forward. So we jump back and then we move forward a little bit, then we jump
Yes.
back. It's like we're doing a hokey pokey. And so I think we needed those. We needed those to know those time jumps. And when you're listening to audiobooks, you don't always know and you don't always remember. And so then you're like, is this before or after? And it's like, and so it was before the previous chapter, but after the previous scene that was still in this chapter. And so I like the anchors. I think they needed now when I first read Peter Swanson's Kill Your Darlings, I got that on audiobook without ever reading the blurb. I didn't know until the third chapter it was going backwards because I'm like, what's happening? And then I stopped the
Mm,
audiobook and I looked at the table of contents and all the dates were going backwards and I'm like, oh. And so then I
mm,
started it over because I'm like, but I just try to picture reading something like Kate Atkinson's Life After Life, where the same person keeps being reborn over and over. And if you were trying to do that without having some anchoring with the actual timestamps, it wouldn't have made any sense. So we do use that, but Reynolds uses both. He uses actual anchors, and then there's scene breaks. But scene breaks don't always work great in audiobook. So
yeah.
so here we are. So then we need to like ground everybody every time there's a new scene. And so it was like the next day or something, because those are moving forward in time. So
Mm-hmm.
we get clues through the relationship status, whether it's early or more established, the emotional tone, whether he's more uncertain or whether they're more grounded, and specific callbacks to previous scenes. Um, you know,
Yeah.
those would be like, well, this is sequential in a time frame for the jump. Um, so the reader is inferring things, but the author also makes it pretty clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Um,
was not confused. I
I
was
was not
so
confused either. This,
expecting to be confused, but I not at all. Even in the audiobook, I was not confused. But I got the paperback and I put all of those notes for myself just because
yes,
I'm like, this is the book that I want to I like, and I was like, do I get it in Kindle and paper? I was like, no, this is the book I want in paperback because I want to actually like mark things in and like I'm gonna use some of the things that he does as a teaching material. First, like I had like workshop ideas. I'm like, ooh, you're doing this so well.
yeah,
People need to know how to do this. This is done so well. So I think, um,
I get all of them that I do the novel deep dives in paper, just so I can
yeah,
mark them up too and say,
mhm,
oh, wait, where was that? Because
yeah,
even though I'm usually audio first for almost everything that I read, if I'm trying to pick them apart, I do like to have a book.
yeah. I'm the same way with the audio, just because I just do not have enough time in my life to read as much as I want to. And if I do not do audiobooks, my reading is just going to be very, very like I'm not going to be able to read as much as I like.
Oh, I know.
And like,
I'm audiobooks, a couple of them a week, man, just boom, boom. But some of them land harder, and then you're like, I need to spend more time with
yeah.
that. Yes.
And that's what I usually do. I usually get my audiobooks at the library, which I did for this one. I got this on Libby. And afterwards I have like all of my books. I end up like, oh, I wanna have this one. I want to return back to it. I want to reflect on it, or I want to kind of go back and read it, certain sentences or whatever. And then I buy the paperbacks because like to me, this is a sign. If I have a paperback of that book, it's either I picked it up at library sale or something like that, secondhand bookstore, or I listened to it and I liked it so much that I wanted to have um, it on my
Same.
shelf. I think is like the biggest honor. I wish somebody would do that to my books, like I would be so honored.
I'm sure there are. You just don't always know. All right. So, scene purpose and reverse structure. In a traditional narrative, scenes build forward. Here, each scene reveals something new about something we'd already seen and already know. How does that change how the scenes are constructed?
I did not notice that much of a difference in the scene construction. I think he still used the traditional scene structure where everything is going forward. As we discussed in each chapter, there are sometimes multiple scenes and then they are all going forward. I did not notice a difference in scene. There was like scene and sequel to me when
Yeah,
I was
I
reading it.
thought it was the same. It was the same.
Yeah,
But the thing is when you see something mentioned for a second or a third or a fourth time, that's when I will like flip back and say, oh, how did this show up later? So we talked about the chicken fingers and we talked about the
the
French,
threads. Yes,
and
the
it was
threads.
just like, okay, these are showing up everywhere. These mean something.
Yeah.
And so the French fries, it was the connection to his grandfather. With the chicken tenders, it was this is something that Arya likes that nobody else in her family even cares that she likes. And so he is going to be the person who brings her chicken tenders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at the end
So
it's like I want to I should have brought her or it was at the beginning roses and but like no, I know her well enough. Like my husband knows me like I don't like roses. I like flowers, but I like wildflowers. So
yes,
whenever he goes for whatever things he's like, "Oh, I had to go to like three stores to find wildflowers. Nobody had them." And I'm like, "Ah, this is like the best thing ever." Because he knows that
you
that's what I
know,
like,
he knows
right?
you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think the scene structure is just that the author was intentionally trying to think, how can we fill in what we were missing before? What's an assumption that we can correct or disrupt? And what's an emotional layer that we haven't yet peeled back to understand more? So that
Mhm.
they are reframing the previous but chronologically future events.
I like the reframing part. I'm trying to make a comparison with if we just have a going forward chronology. And I think there it's a little bit more about we had a question or kind of like a hook in a previous chapter, and the next one is going to give you a little bit more information and either confirm or reframe your suspicions. And here, I guess I'm going to have to think about it, but I guess here there was more reframing. But I
Yeah,
think there was some confirming too.
there is some confirming too. Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe more reframing than confirming because we are assuming some things that are not the case down the road that the reveal that the revelation shows us that the reveal shows us that that's not the reason why this is all happening. I feel like I'm going to reread it for the third time now that after our conversation, after
Yes.
your
No,
insights,
and then
I'm
we're gonna
like,
have to film a follow-up video. No, I correct. No.
but yeah, you making me think. Because I was like, I don't think that the scene stuff. I don't. I think it's kind of like about the same.
No, I thought it was too, but I thought it's just like, what does it impact it and stuff. All right. So curiosity versus suspense. This book leans on the how do we get there rather than what happens next. So how does Reynolds build curiosity as a driving force?
And I love that you said, "Why done it?" I have never ever heard that. I am totally stealing that from you.
I don't think I invented it. I think that that was something that has been used for like Poker Face and maybe even Columbo. It's a type of uh, usually a mystery where you know what happens, who did it, usually from the beginning, but then you have to try and figure out why. And so,
I now that I'm thinking, not trying to plug in my book, but now that I'm thinking about when I was writing the last book, the Not a Fake Chance, which is dual POV and dual timeline, it was one of those things where we know that they broke up in the past, but
okay,
not until the dark moment do we find out why
why?
they broke
Yes,
up.
no, I love those. And it's just like, oh, yeah.
That
So it's
that's the,
hanging out there as a story question the whole time. Why did they break
exactly.
up? Because that's going to come back. You can't just have a second chance and not address that.
Yeah, yeah. And I never thought about it as why done it because when I was trying to intertwine all of those timeline, the two timelines and the two POVs, which was quite a juggling act, it was so much fun to construct, but oof, I spent so much time on the construction of that story. But I think without unknowingly, the why was the answer to a lot of things.
That's right. Yeah, because that for romance is definitely built into the character growth arc that they need to go through in order to earn their happy ever after. And so
Yeah.
the character growth arc here, Neon is, moving from the theoretical to the real, from the, physical to the emotional, all of these maturity things. And so I
Mhm.
think that Reynolds builds on this the curiosity with the lack of suspense because we know where it's ending is by giving us some partial clarity. We see moments and then the next scene kind of complicates it. And so it creates a feedback loop that you and I might be reading this book until infinity because you read and you form an interpretation and then the next scene challenges it and then you have to update your understanding
Yes.
even though you're moving backwards. And so this cycle keeps the engagement high, even though we don't have traditional suspense. So the curiosity thrives on the incomplete understanding, not total confusion. And this is something I tell writers, especially newer writers, all the time when they're writing openings and they're being really coy and they only want to tell us 10% because they want to save 90%. And I'm just like, no, people are going to be confused and they're not going to know what's going on. You have to tell them 90% and hold back 10% because then they're going to want to know that more than if they only knew the barest minimum and they're just stumbling through this universe and they don't even know what's important. And
Hmm.
so yeah, I think it's like a shift in the grounding.
I was doing a talk. This is like a new talk that I put together on female gaze in writing attraction. And I really think that this book has all of the principles of female gaze in it.
Okay.
Like when I talk about female gaze versus male gaze, it does not, like the gender of the author does not matter.
No, it
It is
doesn't.
the
Yep.
presentation, and like the female gaze deals with interiority a lot. And this book is all about that interiority and growth, right? Although we talk about, he says that he likes what Aria looks like, and he's trying to find epithets to describe her better, and he's trying to find this vocabulary that is better than fine.
Mm-hmm.
When we are reading the book, what he loves about her is everything else, really, even though he talks about at the beginning the body parts and how he doesn't want to linger. So throughout the book, we understand that it's the interiority. It's what is Ari about and how her relationships are, how she is with him. That is what he loves, and just I think that's why I love a lot more of the movies and the books that have that interiority and female gaze to them rather than action movies that are more what's next, what's next, what's next, and
Oh
exterior
yeah. Character
level.
driven. Yeah.
Yeah, so I like it's character driven, and I like that's why I also like to be in the first POV
Yep.
or like close third, deep third. I want to know what the people are feeling and seeing and like thinking. So this YA first person kind of hits that note. And you were mentioning also the incompleteness. And I think that also like I feel like that's sometimes a signature in female gaze too, where you don't have these like big descriptions and kind of completeness, but where I talk about it as like strobe lights. You're just given a piece of information, and then you're gonna be given a next piece of information and the next piece of information. And you know how in strobe lights you don't see everything at the same
Yeah.
time, but through each of
You
this
got to put it together. Yeah.
you can put it together, your brain can put it together. So I think that is another thing that he does here. He gives us this chunks of his life going backwards, and we don't know everything, but every next 24 whatever reveals something more and completes the picture in a way that we haven't seen before. Like we know something is important about the French fries, and now we know a little bit more, and now we know a little bit more, and now a little bit more, and there is never a thing that tells us the whole story of the French fries, but through this flash and strobe light, showing us the French fries throughout every chapter, in the end, we're like, we understand the whole picture. Our brain can construct the whole from his grandfather's favorite food to why he's bringing it in to his girlfriend before they're going to have a first time. That's a representation of him in his
Absolutely. Yes.
essence.
Coming of age, themes in reverse. How does the reverse story structure enforce the themes of identity, responsibility, relationship, and self awareness, or any other of the coming of age maturity themes?
And I think again we touched on all of this. I think that his understanding of what is important and what isn't important changes. We talked about the dog and his responsibility with that, and the self-awareness part also is what does he want? And at the end, I think they say, "I know my three words." Also,
Mhm.
did you notice that one? I felt like that
Yes.
one was
Yeah, because they were the project that Neo was doing for the yearbook, they were doing a digital online yearbook, and he was trying to capture each of the seniors on film and say three words that represent you in your senior year and who you are in this moment. And I'm pretty sure those three words were "I love you," right? So
yes.
yeah,
That's where my mind went.
that
That's
okay.
where
So
my
you and
mind went.
I are
Yes.
alike here. Or it could have been "I love chicken fingers," all as one word. So
Well, I think that did you notice that they don't say I love you to
no,
each
they
other?
don't. They don't.
They
I was
do
looking for
not.
it. After I
No.
saw that, I was looking for it and I'm like, that's just like a teenager. I'm not going to go first. She's not going to go first. None of us are
Yeah.
going to say this, even though.
But it's implied and in so many different things, it's
Yes.
very clear. And I know he knows that she loves him. There are so many sentences that I saw where it is very clear that he's very, very sure that she loves him, that this is the love, the best love. That's why on the cover, if you can see, it's like love and then
Love.
crossed
Yep.
out and like
Yep.
in bold love story. Like there's no doubt in his mind that this is the love story that rivals the love story of his grandparents, right?
Yes.
And of everything that is in the movies, which is another thing that he introduces. He references movies like, oh, if we were in a movie, this would have happened and this would have happened. He introduces that several times. So he compares, and then Denzel Washington and playing romantic lead in the movie, that's like another thread. And he references movies. And if I were in the movie, this is how this scene would play out. But in reality, it plays out differently. So he kind of goes back towards this that is imaginary life. This is what we kind of consume, and this is what reality is like. And that's why this is a very much a love story and based in reality. So I think that goes a little bit also to the self-awareness part. His relationship with his sister, I think, was another big one that I could see that changed throughout the story and how he both likes her and trusts her and also does not understand her,
Right.
does not really understand her much at all. Yeah, and I think we talked about the identity to me, like the identity and the self-awareness is also going back to the yearbook and the three words and what is it that he no matter how much he wants to have his first time with Ari, he also is totally fine if nothing happens because her what she wants and how she feels about it is more important to him
That's right.
than his own desires at
Gratification.
that point.
Right. No, I thought that was so sweet too. So
Yeah.
yeah, for coming of age, we already talked about the his views on sex and intimacy and how that evolved. And so I think earlier on that it chronologically later, Neon feels more grounded, more self-aware, but as we move backward, we see more uncertainty and insecurity and some emotional blind spots. So the reader is doing synthesis that, like you'd said with the strobe lights, that we're building the arc for ourselves, which then invest the readers in the process, and you're like, oh, to get from this to this, he must have had growth, and we saw that in the lack, right? And you don't have to always show change directly if you can show the contrast as the character um, is aging.
Yeah. Yeah. I liked how when they talked about they when they met and then he says I was sure that afterwards, when they found out that they're in the same school, he's like, and I'm gonna go and find her. And then, no, we actually haven't talked for several months afterwards because even though she's in my school, our paths didn't cross until that wrestling match and all of that stuff. I think that shows, and I have a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old, and I'm like, that tracks so much that they're going to be like, oh no, I like that person, but I'm not going to go and try to talk to them or something until
No,
they
we
just,
have to just like run into each other. And I'm like, well,
exactly.
clearly this is a large high school. So
Yeah, still like, it's not, there is this mentality of like, oh, I'm not gonna go and
I'm
expose
not going to
myself,
make the
or
first move. That's
yeah,
vulnerability,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
All right, let's go to reframing some key moments. Which moments take on new meaning once we see what came before them? And how does that deepen the coming of age arc?
Again, I feel like we talked about it.
I'm going to take one example and then you can jump in if you want. So, the
Okay, go
example
for
that
it.
I liked for that is that very early on, Neon was worried about how tricky the bras are on latch. And he's worried that he's going to fumble this. And he's also worried about putting the condom on right. And he reminds himself not to carry the condom wrapper with his teeth so his breath won't taste like a tire dipped in Vaseline, which I thought was very descriptive and also accurate and gross. These fears are relatable and reasonable and funny and cute. And then later we get more background on just how long Neon has been prepping for this big event, including the time his mom takes him out for a mother-son date at the Pancake Palace, where she asks him about why do you have one of my bras in your room? And she's worried, wondering, just are you cross-dressing? Because I can buy you your own, but don't be wrecking mine. Those are expensive. And he's like, no. He's humiliated. He wants to crawl under the booth at the pancake place. But he was taking it to practice because he wanted to be able to take off Arya's bra without, embarrassing himself. And his mom laughs and tells him she can take off her own bra. She doesn't need you. And that Neon should be more focused on whether he's ready emotionally and for what adding sex to their relationship would mean, rather than working on his manual dexterity skills and whether he can unbra her. And so she reminds him to focus on what's important. But then in the key moment, flashing back to the very beginning, he's worried about absolutely everything. He's done the work to get himself there emotionally, but now he's like, whoa, what if she's trapped in this bra forever? And I'm like, you could still have sex. But so he flips the usual coming of age. And so instead of watching Neon grow, we're watching layers peel back of who he used to be, and then we understand who he's becoming. So
Mhm.
some of these moments where he's confident or romantic and certain, we later see that he was tentative, he was emotionally incomplete, and that he was misinterpreting some things, and other people were misinterpreting him, like his mom being, why is my son borrowing my bra and hiding out with it in his room? And so what looks like stability later becomes something more fragile and meaningful. And so that's what
Mhm.
I thought of when I was thinking of that question, was just like, oh my God, can you imagine your mom taking you out to a restaurant and asking you about her bra, and
Uh,
you just want to,
uh,
like, climb underneath the table? I can imagine that. I've got a
yeah.
15-year-old too. And so
Yeah. Yeah, I was there living it from the mom's perspective because my kids tend to do so. It's like, Mom, stop, like we're in public, don't talk about this. When I start bringing something up, and it doesn't have to do with sex or bras, but something that is, whatever that they feel is embarrassing, and they're like, no, Mom, like we're in a public place, everybody around can hear. And it's like, they don't care. It's like, no, I care. It felt so familiar to me. And I think that when I read YA, part of it, I love the coming of age experience, but also whenever there are parents involved too. I think now that I read YA as an adult, I relate to the parents so much, and I'm
oh,
like,
same.
oh, totally. And I can relate to the mom. And it was like, there is so much, I think, like, positive, so many, how would I say it? Positivity is not just like the examples of how to do it that come from Neon's family when you
Yeah.
talk, and then it is not like when, and this is also reframing, right? She's like, why are you wearing my bra? Like, why do you have a bra? Are you wearing it? And then in my head, it's going to be, oh my God, she's going to be homophobic, and she's going to be like, not in my house, man. And then she's like, I will just buy you your own if you want to try a
These are really
bra.
expensive. Yeah, this doesn't fit me, and you're gonna stretch it out.
Yeah, she's like, no, no, no. And I understand that, the worry about expensive bras. I was like, this is I don't have a worry about the expensive bras. It was like me and my daughter we have the same size shoe. And then there are certain shoes that I'm like, you do not wear these shoes unless you talk to me. These are expensive shoes, and I
Right.
don't want you to like, mess them up for me.
Stuff
So
'em. Yeah.
so I'm like, I can relate to it. And when that was the framing of the question, and when she's like, "Oh yeah, I'll just buy you your own one," I'm like, "Oh, that felt so, I don't know, cozy
What
to
that
me."
reminded me of was the plot line from Schitt's Creek when Patrick and David got engaged, and Patrick was a little apprehensive to tell his parents, and his parents felt bad, but they felt bad because they felt bad that he didn't feel like he could share that with them, that he thought that they might not embrace that.
Yeah,
And that was just, it was a very sweet reversal. And this too, with the mom saying, I'll get you your own if you want them. If you want to
yeah,
wear them, I'll get you them,
yeah,
but we'll find one that's like sized for you. And
yeah,
I'm gonna keep mine. And so
yeah.
I thought that was very sweet, and it showed his family, but then it also kind of like he's still fixated on that in the very last part right before he goes into that room, and it's just like, okay.
Yeah, and I can relate. This is like goes to all of the little things that we get fixated on, and that afterwards we're like, oh, it didn't matter at all. But for some
It did
reason,
not.
before you do the things, it feels like that's the most important thing. Yeah, Heated Rivalry did the same thing, where afterwards, when they find out that they're together, and there's like, well, why didn't you tell us before? We sort of kind of knew. We were just like, didn't know the detail. It was kind of assumed already. Anyways, parents usually, that kind of good parents usually know, right? Kind of they're
Yeah.
aware of their kids. But
We're
yeah,
gonna go spend the summer at the lake in the cabin, and
yeah, yeah,
just by
yeah,
myself, totally by
yeah,
myself,
yeah.
and don't come.
And they live nearby, anyways.
Yeah, I
But
know. It's like, don't bring groceries, don't swing over.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's not weird at all. So, what are you? They know. They already
Yeah.
know.
And
So,
that's one of those things when you become a parent. Like I think when I was a child and I was thinking about my parents, I was like so certain that I'm hiding some things very, very well because my parents, it somehow feels, I think, when you're a young adult that your parents are not full human beings. Somehow, I think that a lot of the same feeling happens when we interact with elderly people. For some reason, it feels like they're somehow diminished. And I'm like, that's the opposite. Like these are the people who have lived longer and have gone through more stuff. And if anything, kind of can both understand you more and have a lot more lived experiences to relate to you because of that. So I think that what was making that breath scene was making me think about that as well. That his mom both was on his side and knew what he was going through.
all right. Next up, when we use reverse chronology versus other story structures. So now, ooh, what have you got? What kinds of stories would benefit most from this type of structure, and when might it actually weaken the story instead? And then, can you think of examples of other types of story structures that are non-chronological and when it worked well?
I'm gonna go piggyback on what you said about the why done it. I think this is going to be good for character-driven stories where you want to, even if it's, I think it could be used in some kind of a mystery too, but the kind of mystery where the why is important, right? Where when we meet somebody at the beginning, we want to understand how did they get there. Again, going back to Breaking Bad, the pilot season and the episode, right? We get that you see them driving mad dash
Yes,
in this
driving the camper
RV, yeah, and then
random
run out,
place.
and then the trousers fly off, and then he runs out, like not like what was he not wearing anything? He was in his apron at that point or
And
something
his
like
tidy
that.
whities, but they were
Yeah,
kind
and
of
his
not
tidy
that tight.
whities, and you're like, what happened?
How did you get here? Yes.
How did we get here? So I think that that is definitely a good one. I was trying to think of what would be a bad one, and I think I wonder if having a longer story with this would be too much because I feel like this was a fairly short book. And
Yeah,
I
it
think
is.
that was good. I think that if it were a longer book, or if you were trying to do this on a longer book, there would be a lot more opportunities for the reader to get lost and for this structure to sort of be diluted. I don't have any proof to that. It's just my personal feeling. I feel like this was really good length for it to feel utterly satisfying, to be able to track everything and hold it in my head, even in the audiobook format, and for that structure to be a boon to kind of make my experience better. I don't know if I could have done it with a book twice this size.
If you're thinking of like a romantasy size
Yeah, yeah. How many
600
pages is
pager,
that
because
exactly?
this is like
Right.
230 pages.
Okay,
And I think
230
that's
pages.
so that's a good point. I'm thinking of um two time loop stories that I read that came out, both of them, oh, maybe 10 to 15 years ago. So Life After Life by Kate Atkins and Atkinson, and then also the first 13 lives of Henry August, I think, by Claire North.
I
And
did
both
not
of
read that
those,
one.
the main character gets born and tries to accomplish something and then dies and they start over. And so Kate
Oh, so it's kind of
Atkinson,
like the Midnight Library, but by
yes.
Matt Haig also.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep. And so with those structures, they were much longer. They were both much longer than this, but we kept going back to the same start. And then it was like, can they make the change? And so it's also kind of like Groundhog's Day. Can
Mm-hmm.
they make the right changes to change the future so they can get out of this loop and go on? And so those longer was okay because we always knew where we were starting. We weren't having to track everything each time, but you were trying to be like, well, what's the difference and what goes different here? And there was a little bit of redundancy in some of those. I think for structure should serve meaning. So reverse chronology should mirror how we reflect the relationships and emphasizes cause and effect in a different way than chronological storytelling would. And if you're experimenting with structure, then, as an author, think what does this story structure allow me to do that a linear story wouldn't? And if the answer is nothing, then maybe it's not the best choice for it. And
Yeah.
so I think you do want to, like, one of the novel deep dives I'm going to be doing very soon is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And so
I did
that
not read
is,
that one.
it's not a reverse, but it's a flash ahead. So the
Mm-hmm.
first scene, and it's a pretty long scene, is like the last thing that happens. And then we go back like 7 or 8 years earlier. And so the
I
very
feel like she does that a lot.
she
I like,
does. She
yeah,
loves to play with story
yeah.
structure. And this one's super fun because it's set in like the 1980s at the space program in the United States with female astronauts. And so we start off and it's a space mission and things are going bad and people are in jeopardy. And our main character, our POV character, is on the ground in Houston in mission control, talking to the people who are on the ship, including people. These are people that she knows well. She's in the space program. She's been in and all these things, and she knows those people. Um, but you don't know who she's really the closest with when you're reading that scene the first time. It's not until boom, we go back and she goes through 8 years of getting to that point, and then you're like, oh, I have to go back and reread that really key scene, and then we move forward from there. And so
Mm-hmm.
that one, I think it worked really well because I mean, it could have worked as a completely chronological, and that would have been like a really key scene. But to
Mm-hmm. At
start
the
with
end.
that key scene where you have all of the events but none of the emotion that is in the person who was living through it. I mean, they're obviously having emotions, but we don't have the
Mm-hmm.
backstory, we don't have the why, we don't have the context. And
Yeah.
all of that makes so much more sense as you go back. And so
When you
I
get
kept
there.
like, well, of course it was an audiobook, so like flipping back is hard, but I do it anyway. It is just like, oh, well, what happened to that person? And, on this mission, and because things were happening. So that I thought that was a good one. I'm trying to think of some other ones. There
I don't know of any that used complete reverse chronology like this. This is the first book where it was a true complete
Kill Your
reverse
Darlings,
chronology.
Kill Your Darlings by Peter Swanson, that mystery.
Yeah, the
It's
one that you talked
complete,
to with
yeah,
Sophia
with
about.
Sophia. So
Yeah.
that one was, and I'm trying to think if there's another one that was reverse like this. Another one that had a funky story structure. It was moving forward, it wasn't working backward, but was Birthday by Meredith Russo. And so
No, I don't
Birthday,
know that one.
it's two young people who are growing up together, and then they're exploring their identity and their sexual identity, and we only see them on one day of the year, and it's the day that they were
Hmm.
both it's both of their birthdays. And
Hmm.
so we jump ahead and things that happened and they catch up, and
Yeah.
their whole worldview is changing, so that's a good
And
one.
I've seen that structure, yeah, like
Same time
Colleen
next year.
Hoover in November 9th uses that. I think, yeah, other
Oh
things
yeah.
that you're talking about where we're in the loop in the Groundhog Day, Seven Deaths of Evelyn
Oh
Hardcastle,
yes.
the murder
Seven and a half
mystery.
deaths or something.
Yeah, yeah, seven and a half. That is it. Seven and a half deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. And then when the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo came out, I'm like, did they what is wrong with number
That was
seven and name
confusing. This is
Evelyn?
how I accidentally ended up reading the seven and a half deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, is because I thought it was the seven loves of Taylor
Husbands, yes,
Jenkins
of
Reid.
Evelyn. I'm
So I
like,
got
did
the
we not
wrong book from the
check?
audiobook and I read it anyway. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. Because that was
Yeah.
that, who was it? Stuart Torton or whatever. Yeah, I think so.
Yes, yes. Yeah, the locked room mystery, but that made sense because he was going into different people's heads and
Going into
relating to
people's
it the
heads. And
same
right.
same
And
same mind but different bodies, right? So that
mhm,
was an
kind of
interesting
like the
concept.
premise of Every Day by David Levitan,
Yeah,
where A was in a different body each day. But this one, you need to solve a murder mystery or you're
yeah,
permanently dead.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Another one that I was thinking about was for my book club we read. It's called The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
I read that.
that
Yeah.
that's also a flash forward. You start with, okay, they're uncovering this body years in the future after this huge giant storm, and then they find that body, and then you find out how all of that happened and how it got there. And I think that was an interesting thing. And that was definitely one where I went back and reread the first chapter.
Yes.
Another one of the classics is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. You also start in present tense, and then you go
Okay.
back and you find out how did she get there. So when I talk to students, especially beginner students, I think that I'm not going to tell everybody master the straightforward structure first. If you want to experiment with unusual structures in your very first book, I think go for it. Like there is no writing works differently for everyone, go for it. But I think great advice. I'm going to give you great advice. I learned that in a songwriting class. So when we were doing our songs, what they would do is they would give us two songs and we will analyze exactly how those songs were structured and what they used there. And then we were to pick one of those and then were to compose our song based on the principles of that song. So the goal was to make your song as closely like that in structure, in how it's constructed. You're still
Okay.
writing your own lyrics, music, all of that stuff. And now I'm taking a class by Nina Schuyler. It's called Writing Stunning Sentences, and she has a Substack I highly recommend. What she does is she basically takes a sentence, and usually literary fiction, and then from somewhere that she read, and then she explains to you how was this sentence created, and then shows you how can you do it, and if you mimic that structure and you understand how that is constructed. So going with that thought is if you're trying to, my advice for people who are trying to play with structure for the first time, pick a book or series of books that use that, and we kind of gave you examples like
Yes.
this happens a lot, like amnesia trope with Born Identity, what right now with Andy Weir and the project Hail Mary. It's the
Yes. Yes. No,
same,
he's
right?
off in space. How did he get there? Yes.
Yeah, and like it's the same. So pick a thing that already exists. Take that book, take it apart, see how structurally, especially if that's like, oh, I like that. Like I love Project Hail Mary. I think it's
Oh,
done
me too.
really, really well
It's good,
structurally.
good, good. Oh,
Yeah, right? So take that apart and then try to follow the same structure.
no,
And
I
when
love
I,
that approach. That's,
right?
yeah, you don't need to invent the wheel. There's lots of
No,
wheels out here.
no.
And pick a
You don't
couple
have to
and
be
see how they
wholly
do it.
original.
Because another
Yeah.
one that I was thinking of when we were talking is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the first scene, there's two people in the woods and one is holding a gun on the other person. You don't know who, you don't know why. But then, boom, we're back. And this is a hockey obsessed town. And there's the coach and the coach's family and all these kids.
Yeah.
And everybody in town cares so much about the hockey
Yeah.
team. We're the Bears from Beartown. And you're like,
Yeah.
who's in the woods? Why are they in the woods?
Yeah.
What's going to happen? So the whole way we're going through there. And then
Yeah.
just like, and then we catch up with it. And then all the consequences. So,
And I think that that's a great way. Pick something, use the structure, and a lot of resistance I get, especially from earlier writers, is that they're like, I want to be super original. And again, you absolutely can be, but sometimes when you're just starting, it's just hard. It's just you're making it so hard for yourself. It's like building something for the first time completely from scratch without any instructions, cooking a recipe that you've never done and you are not like a
and you
professional
don't know
chef.
what baking powder does. So you don't even think to do it because you
You ju-
haven't read a
You're
recipe
making
in
your
your
life
life.
harder and you're going to be
You're
doing
trying to
so many
invent things
edits.
rather than create at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing that that's one of one of my favorite ones. People who are pantsers or say, well, I'm writing organically and I'm going to see what happens, don't like the word structure.
Right.
And I stopped using the word plot because to me, plot and structure are not the same
They're not
things.
the same. No. Plot are what are the events that happen.
Yeah.
And
And
there
like,
that goes chronological, but your structure could be very different. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm like, structure is kind of like the guardrails. They're gonna take you to a place where you are gonna feel comfortable and they're gonna be more protective of if you need help. And then when you don't need help, when you know what you're doing, you can go and do your own thing. Like it's really there to support you, not to restrain you. And I think once people make peace that structure is not a creativity killer. The goal of the structure is not to tell you exactly what to write, but to kind of support you in places where you are struggling. So you don't have a saggy middle, or you
Right.
are getting to the middle of your of your book and you're like, I don't know what to do next. I'm like, if you wrote half of the book, the next half of the book should be very easy to write because you already have all of the components. Like
Right.
you seed
You
everything in
should.
your
There
first
shouldn't be
half.
new stuff coming in too much. Yeah.
Exactly. Shouldn't be any new stuff coming in. You're just basically like reversing everything. And so, anyways,
Another story structure that I like is if there's like two POVs and you're not clear if they're in the same timeline or if one of them's in a past timeline. And so
oh, tell me which ones. I don't, nothing pops into my mind.
so these are usually like domestic suspense or thrillers type ones. So I just finished The Intruder by Frida McFadden, but it was
Mhm.
also done really well in Alice Feeney's Rock, Paper, Scissors. And so for both of them, there are things that are happening in a current timeline, and then there's like a series of flashbacks or a diary. And then that's like, was that the past? Is that a different character happening, in the near
Mhm.
past, or, you don't know. And then another one that's like this with three different perspectives, and you don't know where they fit in relation to each other in time and relation to the characters to each other, that I'm doing a novel deep dive on pretty soon, is The Overnight Guest by Heather. Oh my goodness, what's the last name? I've got it here. Um, Gutenkopf. Okay, that's why I can't remember it.
Mhm.
It's Heather Gutenkopf, and it's The Overnight Guest. And so there are three POVs, and you're not sure the relationship. Spoiler alert for this book, whose name I can't remember. It was three different eras in the same character's life, but they use different names and different POVs and very different styles. So you don't know it's the same person until the end.
So their life has changed so much that they kind
Mm-hmm.
of,
Yeah.
that's interesting. That's
Yes.
interesting.
And so that one was super interesting, and I have a copy of it and I can't find it. So
Hmm.
anyway, but yeah, I love the structure and the things like that. And so I think that
Yeah,
that's
I don't read a lot of thrillers. I read some amount of mysteries, but I don't really read a lot of thrillers. And I feel like you do more thriller and mystery stuff. So I feel like in those genres, there is more good use of unusual story structures. I also find that unusual story structures land well in literary fiction. One of my favorite authors, Barbara Kingsolver, does
oh
that
yeah,
well
I like
too. In Prodigal Summer, she has three, and that's a different storyline where she has three different characters that you follow separately and you're like, how are they all connected? I do not know how is it all going to come together. And then in the end, it does. They all come together in the end, and you kind of like understand all of that. So instead of having two POVs that are narrating the same event and kind of like are intertwining this way, you basically have three separate things that all converge into one final moment where
Ooh,
it
I like
matters.
that. I wrote it
Yeah.
down. Prodigal
Prodigal
Summer
Summer
by
uh,
Kingsolver.
by King Solver.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep. I've read
Uh,
some of her other stuff. And I did remember the name of the book. It was The
yeah.
Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. So that is,
Oh, oh yes. I love that
I love
whole
that too. And that's like, that's not a mystery. That's like
it's a
sci-fi.
fantasy.
Yeah,
It's a well,
is
I
it?
would say it's a fantasy.
Oh
It's a
yeah, they're well,
future
it's listed as
Earth.
both fantasy and sci-fi on Goodreads for whatever they know.
Interesting. I could see it because it's a future Earth dystopian sort of thing. And I think when it is second Earth of future Earth, it there is
Technically sci-fi.
technology stuff, so it's like after the Earth collapse and like technology collapsed and how the civilization restarted. But also there is magic, and to me, when there's magic, that is automatically
I know,
fantasy.
I know. And so science fantasy, as we sometimes call them.
Ah, yeah. Oh, I love that one. I was just talking about this in my newsletter. In my Substack. I was talking about writing first person versus third, past versus present tense.
Right. Because there's all that stuff going on with those.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
she uses a you in for one of the characters,
Hmm.
which is a second
Second
person, which is
person, right.
so rarely used, which I think is another topic of like it could be another podcast
It
on
absolutely
using
could. Yes.
tenses and first, second, third person to show. And uh what was that one? Recently I've read Lissa something, and there are two narrators, and one narrator is a first person and the other one is a third person. And
Okay.
I think that in the end we were in the book club wondering who's the main narrator, and it felt like the person who was the first person narrator is the main narrator of the story, just because the first person kind of makes it
It
more.
makes it closer. You're in their head.
Mhm.
How can writers apply this? What specific craft lessons from this book, 24 Seconds from Now, would you encourage writers to try in their own work?
My mind goes straight to threads, and it is something that makes the reader very engaged, I think, in the story, because you have multiple things that they're interested in, and they want to learn more of either how did we get there, like again, we mentioned the dog, the fries, the door knocker, the color of the house, the yearbook. And or also like where is that gonna go if you are using even if you're using the straightforward narration. There is always this advice that at the end of the chapter you want to have at least one unanswered question,
Right.
so that the reader wants to move to the next chapter to find out. When you are using threads correctly, you end up with multiple unanswered questions or multiple not fully developed things that the reader's mind is curious about. And I feel like that is going to help you with that. Where I want to go next. I want to read. I want to find out where all of that is taking me. That multiple places are itching in their brains. And
I love that imagery. Oh, yeah.
right? Like this is
Yeah.
like, ooh, what else? So, and I think that one of the things is some readers sometimes say, ooh, I was not that invested in that particular plot line or in that particular character. When you have these threads and they have several of them, even if the reader is not interested in maybe one or two, they're going to be interested in others. It's still going to be enough to propel them forward and to be curious. And I think it's such a great device to keep the reader reading.
Yes, absolutely. So here's my short list of takeaways. If you're going to use reverse chronology, if you're going to try that, or even like a jump ahead and then start over in the past, strategic withholding of some meaning. Show the event, but delay the interpretation, and then contrast-based character arcs. show different versions of the character and let readers connect. Why is this character different now than they were earlier? Scene reframing, asking what new understanding does this scene add to the previous events, which may involve some rereading. Emotional anchoring over the timeline, let the relationships orient the reader. That's how we know where they're at, is how close they are. And then curiosity loops, like you had said, don't end it with no questions. Drop a couple of those threads. Let each scene answer a question while raising a new
A
one.
new question.
Yes. And structure is not just how you tell the story, it's what the reader experiences while they're reading it. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
all right. Okay. So thank you so much, Gala. This has been amazing. Readers and writers, please tune in next week where I'll have more videos on writing craft and various topics about writing, editing, and the writing life. And please check out Gala's website below in the link. It's GalaRussAuthor.com. And if you want the inside scoop on things, sign up for my newsletter. The links that my website is mirandadero.com. And thank you so much. Be sure to like and subscribe. This is freelance fiction editor Miranda Darrow wishing you happy writing.